So there are some few acknowledgements. Please understand that this presentation is just a summary of the book from my perspective, and it doesn't cover the whole book. If you are interested, please just go to the book, because I know that there are so many amazing examples that you can benefit from. The second thing is that recently I was visited National Gallery in Prague, where I was so kind of inspired by some of the painting related to how to articulate your design decisions, and they are used in this presentation, and some resources are from Canva. And this event is in hybrid format. So for a smooth experience for everyone, please submit your questions via Slido. I'm here, as many of you know me, I'm Elham. I'm a UX designer, and I'm hosting the design decisions. And now I'm here for you for the articulating design decisions. I have questions. Have you ever had to make changes to your design that you were disagree with? Yeah, me too. When I saw this painting, I had the feeling that this is me after any kind of changes to my kind of design that I'm completely disagree. But what can I do? I'm just sitting there and just thinking, okay, there's another redesign. To be honest, discussing your design is kind of with some people that they are not designer. It's pretty challenging and difficult. However, it is kind of our work is going to help the company to win, and the product that we are working and the decisions that we are making is ended to a kind of success of the company. So it is really important how you are articulating your design decisions for the people that they are not designers. So it is important to have a great communications with them to understand their needs. So a good designer is not only solving the problem, but also articulating their design decisions in a great way that non-designers can understand and give them the support. But the truth is that design is a kind of subjective thing. Something that seems good to me, you might hate it, like this kind of artwork, that from some perspective, for some people, it is like a masterpiece, and for some people, it just wastes of the space and the energy. So UX design is the same thing. The thing that you feel that your design must talk for itself, it's just a kind of false information. Your design is only good when you can describe why it is good and which problem does it solve. So the difference between a good designer and a great designer is the way that they can articulate their design decisions. And this might help to the kind of success of the company and the product that we are working on that. So as I said, great designers are great communicators as well. One of your main tasks is to articulating your proposed solutions for your design problem. So it can be in the process of documenting it. For example, whenever you are working on a design, you can just write down and document what is your design process through this kind of design. And also you can just create some kind of alternatives and telling that why you think that this doesn't work. What is the usage of this? Whenever you have kind of meetings with your stakeholders, you can refer to these informations and documentations to support your idea, to your thought process. And with that, you're always making yourself consciously aware of even any decisions that you are making and why. But there is another thing that we need to think about, that stakeholders are people too. Sometimes we, as a UX designers, putting a lot of empathy for the users that we completely forgot about the stakeholders. And we forgot that we need to hear them. We need to understand what they are trying to tell us. So always be sure that you are understanding the stakeholders and also keeping some kind of personal leverage engagements to improving your quality of interactions. The next thing is that on the shoulders of the UX designer is to identify the influencers. There are always some people in your projects that they can influence on the outcome of the result of your meetings. So you need to understand who are these people in your projects. They can be in the level of team influencers, they can be executives, or they can be externals. But this is your task to identifying them and creating your kind of mutual understanding and relationship with them. The most important thing is to design the meeting. So people have a kind of limited cognitive load, and the stakeholders are the same. So whenever you have a meeting, try to just remove as much as you can, just like clutters, options, and roadblockers, and just give them the things that they need to focus on. Otherwise, you see that there are kind of couple of minutes that you are just discussing about something which is completely placeholder or some stock image that is completely unrelated to goal of the session. The next thing is that you need to set the context of each design or review sessions or any kind of discussions that you have. First of all, state the goal of these sessions. What do we want to reach from these sessions with the stakeholders? Then summarize the last meeting if there was anything. Just tell them what was the kind of discussions that you had, what was the kind of decisions that you made, and then show them a timeline. For example, if you want to move from the point A to point E, now we are standing in the point C. So we need to discuss about here. And what is the feedbacks that you need to get from here to move forward? And whenever you are feeling that your stakeholders and other people are discussing about something which is completely unnecessary to the goal of the sessions, state it again and just make them sure that you are writing down these topics and you will have another meeting, you will discuss with them. But right now we need to focus on this goal. And the second thing is that before each meeting, please get in the right mindset. What does that mean? Check your ego at the door. No one needs your ego there because whenever there is an ego, there is no mutual understanding and we are not listening what they are asking us. So once there is no ego, you are listening so you can ask them what is the real problem. Ask them directly, what is the problems you would like to solve by suggesting this? Then lead with a yes. Whenever you want to create a kind of response, tell them that yes, I understand what is the problem, so we are trying to find a solution. But this lead with yes, it doesn't mean that any decisions or any kind of suggestion that they had, you need to kind of work on it. It means that we are just hearing you. We are here to listen what you are saying, and I understand the problems that you are mentioning. And at the end, establish a positive persona. Be confident. If you are there, there was something in you that they give you this position. So always be confident and positive. But the next thing is that we need to form a response. Each response needs to have a kind of strategy, tactics, and kind of template. I highly recommend you to going through the book because the templates are a lot and I couldn't cover in this presentation, but you can get to understand in which teams, which kind of people, how you need to talk. But here our kind of objective is to get the support from our stakeholders and taking the agreements to move the forward. But what are our tactics? First of all, show them a comparison. If they are asking you to change something, okay, we are changing, but then showing them side by side so they can see what is the difference and then they can make a decision. The next tactic is to propose an alternative. If you feel something can work better, just prepare it and just show them as an alternative. And give them a choice. Sometimes this freedom to see different kind of options for solving a problem can be a great tactic to move forward. And then ask others to weigh in. This is the part that I said that you need to know the influencers in your company. It can be the teams or executives. So here they can support you with your decisions and they can help you to move forward. But if none of these tactics help you, then postpone the decision. Sometimes under the pressure of the time, we are making some decisions that they can just have a kind of false impact on the user experience. So after that you are just finding the right tactics in the meetings. First of all, identify the problems. What is the problems that we are solving? And then describe your solutions to stakeholders and tell them for this problem, I'm proposing these solutions. And have empathy with the user because it's really easy for stakeholders to forget the users. So just tell them that we solving this problem for this target user, we are reaching some kind of KPIs. And you need to tell them that how your solutions can help the company and the kind of metrics and success of the projects. And at the end, lock in the agreement. You need to ask them directly, is these solutions fine for you or can we move forward? Uh, yeah, this is again another photo that I was thinking that during the design reviews or design discussions, everyone is a designer. But the thing is that we are giving them a space. Once you are inviting them to a kind of design review or design decisions meetings, is that we are giving them the space to impress themselves and giving us some feedbacks. And sometimes, no matter how much we try, we are always need to kind of make some other changes that they are disagree with. So always be sure that there is no misunderstanding because sometimes the stakeholders didn't listen truly what you are saying. Sometimes they just there was something that there was a miscommunication. And always just keep in mind that your design is not the best design. Sometimes there are some kind of better improvement that you missed. Are they completely unreasonable? This is a kind of this phase that they are unreasonable. Yes, they might be, but some people are not. We don't know our stakeholders. But the thing is that if they are insisting on a change and you are not hearing them, so there is no surprise if you are not moving forward. Just know that we as a kind of designers are here to improve everything. And sometimes the stakeholders have a kind of they are seeing better aspects of the design that they can help to kind of solve the problems that you never uncovered them, or they can give you a better overview of the project. So far we were discussing about how the UX designers can help to make this relationship, but now how the executives can help the designers. First of all, acknowledge that we are also individual and we have expertise in this field. So please don't attack our work. Just instead ask lots of questions and effort to understand our perspective and approach. The second thing is that prioritize our needs so that we can get to work. If it's a kind of giving us some more data, some kind of business requirements or timeline, please provide us with this information. Then there are 10 tips for working with designers. First of all, focus on what works. Just change what I like to what works because we are designing for the users, not for you. So we need to understand what is working instead of what you like or what you prefer. Don't provide designers with a solution. Instead of that, help us to understand the problems because we are here to solve the problems from the kind of user experience point of the view. And once we are just providing the solution is that we are forgetting all the necessary steps that we need to take. Ask lots of questions. If needed, just ask as much as you can so you can understand what was the thought process of the designers through just solving the problem. And don't claim to be the user. There are lots of user types and we can get to know all of them. So if you are saying that I'm the user, it's completely wrong. It is the same that you are saying what I like or what I prefer. And let us explain our decision. Before moving to concluding if a design works or not, just give us a safe space to explore and explain what is the kind of this thought process. And empower us to make decisions. Give us enough information, enough space, enough data so we can make a clear decisions and use helpful language. Let's make a better relationship between us and don't attack us with the wrong language. It is really good if a design is based on the data, but if there is no data, this is not a kind of wrong decisions from the designers. And always be prepared. Whenever we are just giving you some designs to review before the meetings, please do it in advance so you have a kind of better and productive kind of uh, uh, comments on our design, and give us what we need to be successful, because at the end we are all be successful. Thank you everyone for your attention. This is the part that my part that I covered. And if you have any questions, please submit it via Slido. And now I will ask Tom, if he's on the call, to answer your question. Thank you, Tom. I see that you're here.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. Glad to be
Okay,
here.
let's go to the questions. There is a question here. What are your recommendations to explain how does the design help to meet company's goal? How to better communicate business impact of my design?
Right. I mean, fundamentally, we have to know what the goals are, right? And how we expect to get there. So typically there's just this gap between the design we have and the expected outcomes for the goals. But theoretically, if we know what those goals are, typically those are money, right? I mean, there may be other more granular goals, whether it's, you know, kind of like engagement or community involvement or whatever, depending on if it's like a company or even like a community organization. But generally speaking, it's about working directly with, I think, your peers and your bosses in the organization to understand the how to connect the dots between those things. I know that's vague. Without understanding the specifics of a case, it's hard to give a specific suggestion other than that's the job, is to figure out how we connect the dots between the decisions that we're making and the ultimate outcomes that we expect for the business.
Thank you. So I can see that there is another question. As per the point 10 of the last slide, what are the primary things or pieces of information designers need to have to do their jobs?
Okay, could I see that slide, or is there a slide?
Yes, that's sure. So okay. It is related to the tips for working with designers, that it is give us what we need to be successful.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you for that reminder. And then the question is, sorry, what are the primary things information designers need to have to do their job? Yeah, I mean, I think, well, we talked about goals just now, right? So understanding the goals of the business is certainly important. Understanding the the process and the way that the company operates, like operationally, how do we fit, where do we fit, and then at a more granular level, understanding the individuals involved in the process. What are their needs? What's important to them as well? Those are high level, but I think those three things kind of sum up a lot of what is in those 10 things that designers need.
Thank you. And how would you approach the situations when you want to propose a bigger change or disrupting innovation that could be out of the scope of the project?
Right. So, I mean, I think you have to, well, I have a couple answers to this. So one is that I would like to think that in some cases there's a path where that larger, more disruptive change is something that we can look toward as a vision, right? And maybe we're not getting there today. Maybe we need to find a way to get there in the future, but we're always using that as like something we can point to for where we're headed, right? And so it may not be necessary to stop everything and completely, change the process. Now, there are absolutely times when it makes more sense. And I think in those cases, it's going to take some time to build support, right? So you need to be sure that you're working with individuals in the organization that can help you influence that process so that you can get that done. In order to influence those individuals, you need to be able to make a case for why the investment of time and resources in, kind of maybe completely starting over with something more innovative is going to ultimately have the outcome that you want. Now, it's been my experience that can go one of two ways. Obviously, one way is that we can get that support that we need, right, and kind of build that momentum. But sometimes designers on my team feel frustrated when they believe they have a really, innovative or more disruptive change. And it's not necessarily that their thinking is wrong, but they actually haven't taken the time to kind of understand the constraints that the business is up against. And so in that way, it ends up being perceived often internally as kind of a naive assumption that it really is as simple as like kind of going this different path. And the truth is that while there are often some obvious, more innovative or disruptive changes that we could make that we believe will improve our customers' experience, actually maybe will improve the customer experience, we are sometimes, I believe, naive about what it takes to like kind of affect that change in the business and all the constraints and other factors that influence how we got here. So if you do decide to go that path, you have to be sure that you've accounted for all those constraints and other factors. Otherwise, it could come off as simply naive, and then people will write you off, and then you don't get to do that. So you have to be sure to do your due diligence, that you kind of understand all of the sides of that in order to get what it's going to take to get that done.
Thank you. There is another question that if I can't, for some reason, back up my decision with data, how I convince stakeholders or influencer that the decision is right?
Yeah, so you don't have to have data for everything. In fact, you won't, right? We can't research everything. Not everything has data to go with it. So I think this is a great question. So I think it's always relevant to try to find, there may be third-party data, right? There may be research out there that you can find for, adjacent products and experiences that we know to be relevant to our industry or domain. That's one way of doing it. Another way, and I think sometimes people think that they're relying on their instinct here. Like one of the things I try really hard to coach my design team in is we need to find that right balance of relying on what we perceive to be our instincts, right? We have experience in this area. We have a sense for what does and doesn't work, right? But actually all of that instinct is rooted in some past experience that we had. Maybe in our last job, we tried something similar and it didn't work. Or we read a book or went to a conference talk where we learned a technique that we knew to be effective and more accepted broadly in the industry. There are always these kinds of connections there. We're not usually just making stuff up, right? And so what I would encourage you to do is to try to think about where that instinct comes from. What experience have I had in the past that informed the decision that I made, right? And I think if you can explain that experience, that lends a lot more credibility to your decision, even if you don't have some data.
I see. Thank you. Great. So the next question is that how would you approach the situations when you want to propose a bigger change or disrupting innovation that could be out of the scope of project?
I think we had that one.
Sorry.
Right. That was the question I answered previously.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. What are your recommendations to explain how does the design help to meet a company's goal? How to better communicate business impact of my design?
Right. I think that was the first question that I answered.
Did we? Okay. Okay. Just moving kind of.
No, that's okay. You got a lot to look at and think about. No worries at all.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Thanks a lot for this amazing book. I'm curious about the response this book created and the readers' stories you heard, especially from non-designers.
Good. Yeah, so I actually pretty frequently get messages from people that share different stories with me. I just got a message from someone yesterday who said that they applied some of the principles from chapter 3 to an interview that they had, and that the interview went much more smoothly, right? So I hear from a lot of people that the things that they've applied and the way that they've learned this has improved their meetings. It helped them get a job or get a promotion. Every now and then I'll hear that it helped improve a relationship in their personal life as well, right? Because many of these things are more broadly applicable, not just to our jobs. Um, it is interesting to hear from people who aren't designers. So once I was giving a workshop in the United States, and because of the timing of the workshop, several people had gotten sick and couldn't attend. And so they opened up the invite to anyone in the company who wanted to come. And we had a lot of product managers show up. Out of 25 people, probably 12 or 13 of them were actually product managers, product owners, which is a little bit unusual. I always have some engineers or product people, but this was more than half of the room. And the reaction from them, by and large, was surprise. They had no idea that we dealt with these issues, specifically working with them. They didn't realize the extent to which they were not often good partners with us in this process, and that this was kind of an industry-wide phenomenon of needing to be able to understand how we can better work with them. And the workshop is specifically designed to help kind of put you in the mindset of someone else, right? So for the PMs, they were asked to be in the mindset of that designer. If you're a designer and you're approaching this problem and you're going to talk to your PM, how would you think about it, right? And so I think it was eye-opening for them to kind of flip the script and think about it from our perspective for once. So I do highly recommend sharing it with other people in the organization. It does seem to be transformative for them as well and help them to become better partners for us.
Amazing. Thank you. There is another good question that how much do you think is the design maturity of company related to its ability to listen to design decision articulation?
Right. So design maturity is something that is difficult to measure, right? We can only really look at the outcomes or outputs of the organization overall. I do like to think about it in terms of, experience level of people on the team, in terms of like the processes and kind of procedures we have in place, whether we're actually integrating strategy or not. These are kind of like different indicators for me. But but it also tends to be true that the more mature design organizations, well, if we can use that word, tend to be the inside companies that are slightly larger, right? Because maybe they've had more time to develop best practices. They've attracted and hired more talented people. And unfortunately, even in those environments where we may have a perceived higher level of design maturity, there also ends up being a bit more people to manage. Dare I say, even like bureaucracy, right? And so anytime you have, even with a design organization that is more mature, when you have people coming from other backgrounds and other types of organizations with different levels of maturity, they almost always have different expectations of how design fits in. And so there's, even in those environments, there's almost always some measure of advocacy that still has to happen for design, regardless of your level of maturity. Even if you get to a point where you feel like, oh, we finally did it, we finally arrived, then that VP of product is going to leave and go to a different company, and then you have a new person and you feel like you have to kind of start all over again. So I feel like it's a constant process, something we're never totally done with. It's something we always have to strive for, I think.
Thank you. So, how can we convince C-level to prioritize long-term design despite its short-term focus on sales, which can be crucial in startups to survive right now?
Yeah, well, that's a very real constraint, right? That we have to deal with. I like to tell people that design has always been about solving a problem within a given set of constraints, right? And we tend to think about those constraints in terms of technology, right? A mobile form factor versus a desktop computer. That's a really common one. Or accessibility, right? These are constraints that we tend to think of. But the constraint of a startup who needs to ship something and sell something in order to survive, that's still a constraint that has to influence our design process, right? We can't ignore that and pretend that we can come up with whatever we want because we think it's the better customer experience if it's not something that in the immediate term is sellable that will allow our organization to survive. So we absolutely have to factor in all of those constraints as well. Now, to get to the question, which is about how to convince the C-suite, I would say it's less about convincing them and more about demonstrating that value. Now, that is something that takes time. It's unlikely to happen in a single presentation, no matter how well spoken you are in that presentation. It takes time to demonstrate that value. So, quick example, in my most recent role, we had a sales-driven culture, and it was a larger organization, but the story was pretty common that a salesperson would come back to our teams and say like, hey, I could sell this account if only we had this feature over here. Well, guess what was the next feature we were building, right? And so you do that a few times and you start to realize that the product is just getting more complicated, not less complicated. It's getting more difficult to use. We're just sticking things together. And in that environment, the way that I tried to approach it was to help people understand that that's actually not being customer driven, right? And this is maybe an important point. Those people think that they're being customer centric, right? By making those calls. Like I talked to a customer, they will buy our product if we add this feature, right? That feels like it's a customer centric way of building products. And what we have to help them understand is that what people say they want and what they actually need, and certainly what they do, often are two different things. And so we would demonstrate that by working with customers to map out the customer journey, right? To get those salespeople on board with like, okay, if this is what the customer journey is, where's their pain points? How can we identify those pain points, right? Once we've identified those pain points, what are the existing solutions that are out there, right? Like walking them through that process over time and allowing them to participate in that with us will help them see their customer requests inside a framework for making decisions that actually makes sense. But without that framework, without any sort of structure about how we make decisions, then it just becomes whoever is kind of like the loudest person, right? Whoever says like, well, my customer needs this, therefore we're building it. So we need to be able to provide them with some sort of construct and framework about how our customers work in order to make more intelligent decisions. I don't know that I fully answered that question, and I apologize for going a little bit off on a tangent there, but I've dealt with it plenty of times. So happy to have a follow-up if that's helpful.
Thank you. I will check the chat if there's anything there. So there is another question. Where is the line between the responsibility of product owner to communicate together and the responsibility of designers to get them together as facilitator?
This varies on by organization, but it also varies just in terms of like people and individual working styles, right? In an ideal world, you have a close relationship with your product partner and you're able to come up with a working agreement about how you work together, right? And I frequently will write this out as just like a one-page document, right? Like this is what it looks like for us to work together. This is that Venn diagram. These are the things that are exclusively product. These are the things that are exclusively design. And there's a bunch of stuff in the middle that we need to figure out how to do, right? Just being open and having that conversation with my product partner is usually, enough to get us started. And, there's always a little bit of push and pull, give and take. We have to believe the best about each other as we move forward. But I find that just like having that explicit conversation and writing it down to be the most valuable step.
Right. So there is these questions. How do we communicate to executives that our products may not meet the target audience's need based on research findings?
Right. So that can be difficult, especially I'm going to make an assumption here that that question is rooted in the idea that the CEO or that executive believes strongly that it is, and so you're proposing something that potentially conflicts with that, right? Um, I would say that so keep in mind, it takes time for hearts and minds to be changed, right? Like it's unlikely that you'll be able to say like, hey, here's the research, and even if you are clear in demonstrating how it conflicts with that person's strongly held beliefs, um, it takes time for that message to sink in, and so you may need to look for more creative ways to communicate that message over time, not just through a presentation, but through other people, right? Through other research that you found, by sharing a link, by bringing in a guest speaker to help, right? Like anything that you can do to continue to communicate that message. It's no different than marketing and advertising, right? Where we need to communicate our message to people in several different ways before they finally kind of like make that purchasing decision. It can be hard for people's minds to shift in that way, and so it definitely like takes time and multiple, maybe even creative ways of thinking through how to communicate that.
Amazing. Thank you. And there is a question that what should we do when the team agrees on the final design, except for one person who will be responsible for implementing it in the future?
Okay, so the context is going to matter here, right? It matters why they disagree. So anytime someone disagrees, I always see that as an opportunity for more data, right? There is more information there that I need to be able to make a good decision. So at the very least, I hope that I've done my due diligence to really understand, well, why does this person object? Presumably, if they're the person that has long-term ownership over the building and maintenance of this part of the product, there's some extra work involved. It is violating some principle for how they think about their own work and their own job. And that's okay, right? That doesn't mean that we have to do it their way, but often if we can understand that perspective and communicate to them, well, even though we know this might require more work, we still want to do this because of the impact or the outcome that it's going to have, right? And so I think hopefully just having that conversation is enough to help. But I will say that if you're not able to get the support from that person, it will make the implementation a lot more difficult. And maybe it's appropriate to just ask them, like, "Hey, listen, I get it. This is not your first choice. You don't want to do it this way. And I understand the reasons why. And yet, at the same time, I would like to ask for your support to move forward with this because it is important that we commit to this and move forward in the best way possible, right? So you're giving that person the opportunity to still disagree, right, with the choice, but support you in service of moving the project forward. And maybe that is an appropriate path to kind of give them permission to do that.
Right. And as a kind of follow-up questions to this, is that what is your recommendations how to make engineers more empathic towards real world users? If it's kind of quite close to the previous question.
Yeah, in my experience, most engineers want to really understand the customers. What they typically lack is the access or information for them to really see it themselves, right? And this is true across the organization. I see this in UX research all the time, right? My team can do a readout for our sales and operations team. And unless they were there or a part of that study or talked to that customer themselves, they're more likely to hesitate on whether or not and it's not that they don't trust us necessarily, it's that seeing is believing, right? Anytime you have an experience yourself, it is significantly more meaningful than if someone else tells you, right? And so I find that often is the gap. And so anything we can do to, rather than telling the engineer, hey, this is what we saw in user testing, giving them access to the video, inviting them to the study themselves, letting them read the transcript, or not drawing those direct conclusions, but just pulling out some quotes for them from that study, right? Anytime, again, creating an experience for someone is totally different than telling someone what you learned, and especially what to do, right? You want them to learn it themselves, right? And that's much more meaningful.
Right. And there's a question that in B2E, it is hard to expect any design maturity from stakeholders. Most of all, they give solution instead of problems. Can we teach them, or is it a lost battle?
I actually don't think it's a whole lot different than other specialized industries where there are domain experts that don't have any knowledge of design or maybe even product at all, right? And so there's this constant need for education and advocacy. So no, I don't think it's a lost cause. You can almost always find one person on the team that is sympathetic, that can help influence and advocate on your behalf, right? And so it may be more fruitful to focus your energy on the people that you feel like you can influence, as opposed to more broadly kind of like on everyone. But no, I don't think it's a lost cause. I think it's always worth the effort to kind of bring people along in that story and try to influence them and their understanding of what we do and why we do it.
Amazing. So I feel that we are getting kind of close to the end of QA sessions, but I would like to ask you that in the book there were so many great examples about your experience through articulating design decisions in different meetings. So if possible, please just share one of those that you feel it's kind of interesting for everyone to listen from you now.
Was there one specifically you wanted me to talk through, or you
No,
were
no, no.
asking me?
Asking you any of those that you would like to share now.
Yeah. I mean, so I think it's always astounding to me how simple, I don't even mean to say misunderstandings, but how simple changes can actually make a big difference in the way these conversations go. There are two examples that come to mind from the book that demonstrate this. One is the CEO that I was meeting with, who started giving us feedback on a specific component and the interaction and how it worked. And I could have taken that opportunity to say, like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Or why should we, change this? Like it would have even seemed positive to engage with him on that. But instead, I took just a brief moment to acknowledge and think to myself, like, okay, this is a CEO. He doesn't normally provide this kind of feedback. There's 6 other people in this room who are all busy and are ready to get along with the meeting, right? Is it possible that he's just riffing, that he's just trying to be one of us, right? And be part of the conversation? And in that moment, when I led with a yes, and I said, yes, there are definitely some ways we can solve for this, it just snapped him out of it, right? It was like he was instantly just like, oh yeah, of course, sure, let's move on with the meeting, right? And it's just interesting how like tempting it would have been to engage him, but because I didn't, and I reminded him that it was our job to think about those things, not him, that was all it took. And otherwise, I really risked taking the conversation in a completely wrong direction. And that was such a simple thing. The other one, which is also kind of simple, is the example I give of the client of mine who wanted to reorder some input fields on a form that we had worked on. And her change was actually a pretty simple change. It wasn't going to cost much, and it was maybe even like trivial. But it just struck me as unusual, given that we had already agreed on the specific order, and how just asking why a little bit more, getting her to talk about why her frame of reference was that different order. It actually exposed me to the spreadsheet that she used and how she was using the system in a way that I didn't even realize. So not only did it enable me, like asking better questions to kind of dig at her request, not only did it allow me to make a better decision for the design in that one specific thing, but it also gave me exposure to something that I didn't even know existed. It helped me actually understand a business process that I previously didn't understand. And so it seems like we're defending our decisions, right? Like just so that our expertise can be valued. That is absolutely one of the things that we're doing. But often we get access to things that we didn't even know just by doing that extra work. We get more information, better data to make better decisions even in the future. And I think that's a really good example of there are so many benefits of trying to approach it this way, that you might even learn something that you didn't even know about before. And we always need to be open to that, even if we have strongly held beliefs about what this individual decision should be in the moment.
So there's a kind of new and interesting questions that in your experience, have you encountered any major differences in articulating design decisions to European stakeholders vs American stakeholders?
Yeah, so I probably about half of the training that I do is in the United States, and the other half is mostly in Europe, some in Asia, India, and China. What I have found is that there are some differences for sure, but a lot of organizations have centered on, first of all, English as the language of choice for their teams. And secondly, a lot of them operate from kind of a Western, if not American, cultural context anyway, even if they're European-based companies, because so many of these companies are doing business in the US, or they're trying to follow some Silicon Valley American model for how we build products, right? Then a lot of them tend to adopt those values and that mindset. Anyway, I'm not saying it's all completely that way, but there's certainly a lot of influences for sure. So in that way, a lot of the principles in the book, especially as you think about like maybe being a bit more direct in your communication sometimes. I know there are some times when I talk about the way that I would give gifts to people, right, as a way of like engaging them or writing them a note. And I'll occasionally hear from people who say, you know, oh, in the cultural context that I live, that might be perceived as like, you know, brown nosing or kissing up to them a little bit too much. And so I wouldn't want to give them a gift, right? Fair enough. The principle there is still the same, that we have to think about what their needs are and find a way to engage with them at a level that is appropriate if we really expect to get the most out of them. So what I would say is don't focus too much on the examples I share from my American context that may not be as appropriate in your own cultural context, but instead figure out, okay, well, what do we do in our culture that would be appropriate, that would still allow me to connect with that person and understand their values, so that I can actually appeal to their needs and expectations as well. It's just about connecting with people and appealing to their values and needs. It's not about maybe the specific examples that I provide.
So for the last question, is that stakeholders I work with strongly prefer mockups to other abstract artifacts during review. This leads to lots of repetitions and pain. How are to improve it?
Yeah, so it's true. People hired us as designers, and they think, right or wrong, even people who have worked in tech for a while and have a more mature understanding of what we do, they still expect there to be some designed artifact. I find it to be appropriate to bring designed artifacts to center the conversation, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, it doesn't have to be my design. Maybe it's someone else's, maybe it's a competitor, right? But it's often helpful to have a visual that you can center on. The other challenge that I find is that often our design systems are so helpful that it's pretty easy to design high fidelity mockups. And then that is a distraction in and of itself. On the last team that I worked on, we actually created a separate design system just for wireframes and mockups. It actually looked a little bit like the Balsamic tool, if you're familiar with that as a wireframing tool. We designed it to look like that so that we could have conversations around a visual that didn't get so stuck on the visual, right? So my point is, I do think it's appropriate to have artifacts for people who seem to be more comfortable looking at a picture to talk around it, but you just need to find the right balance to be sure the conversation can still be centered around the problems that we're trying to solve and not so focused on the specific solution that is in front of them. So another technique I've used is to show that design up front, like, hey, here's the design. It's totally crazy. It doesn't make sense at all, but isn't it pretty? Okay, great. Let's talk about why that doesn't make sense, right? You can use design as a provocation to get that conversation going. And sometimes that's enough just to get the wheels turning. But I personally have found it very difficult, if not rare, to have a team where we're not bringing visuals at all to center the conversation. We almost always have some sort of artifact that we're centering the conversation around.
Right. So thank you so much. I feel that we covered most of the questions, and I really appreciate that your time and energy that you join us. And thank you a lot for
Of
joining
course,
today's.
yeah. No,
Thank you.
it was my pleasure. Thank you so much. If you had a question that you didn't get to ask, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me your question. I'm happy to continue the discussion.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right,
So
thanks everyone.
thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. So still there are some few notes that I would like to just share with you, is that there's a good news for the community, that from the last events I'm collaborating with O'Reilly as a partner, which means that for any of these design digests, I can give away 3 to 5 free ebooks that you can just join me in reading the book. So if you are interested, please, you can just fill in through this feedback form. I'm really looking forward to get your feedbacks for these sessions because I can improve this series of the event. And you can vote here what will be the next book. And if you are interested in receiving one free ebook, please just give me your email. That's it. Thank you everyone for joining.